Live. Hello, we are live. What day? What day is it? It's a Tuesday. I almost said Wednesday.
You know,
Tuesday night.
all the days are just blurring together the last 2 years, right? I mean, it's like a time warp.
It's one
So,
long string of hours. I guess
uh,
that's actually what time is, if you really think
yeah.
about it.
What's
But
more, what's more confusing for me is doing this live show at night. It's
yes,
nighttime. Oh wow,
did you hear that?
they did. Is that a ghost at your place?
It might be. I think it was. So I'm not home. I'm house sitting, and I think they have a Google, like one of those
Oh,
Google
okay.
Home things.
I hope
Something
it's,
that I said
dude.
triggered it because
Dude, that's some demonic activity. That's what's going on, man.
she said to take out the trash. Oh no, it's probably the alarm that says to take out the trash. So there you go. Hey.
That's perfect timing. All right. It's like I don't know if you have you ever watched SpongeBob? I hope
I
so.
have watched some random ones. I was
Oh,
a
dude,
connoisseur.
there's a great episode where they're open 24/7 and like a bunch of weird stuff happens at night. That's what I feel like with this episode right now.
Here we are. Here we are
at
at night. So
at night.
I'm traveling. I'm on my not cool mic, and but look at you. You're still in your spot, ready to go.
Nothing's changed.
Talking about heroes.
Oh yeah.
Talking about heroes tonight. So we did a hero stream a couple of weeks ago. Wow, it's almost 3 weeks ago now. Goodness gracious. Sorry. And look, we got Mike Porter here. Mike Porter, hello.
What's going on, Mike?
So we are talking, and Trinity's on. I don't know if Trinity's still on. He was on. He got tired of waiting.
I
But
don't
you can't
blame him.
rush. You can't rush art. You can't
Oh.
rush that.
Yeah.
So, but here we are. We're talking about heroes, and I think that it's a topic that I think everybody feels like they've exhausted. It's been talked about a lot, especially if you're on any of the nerdy stuff, looking at like superhero stuff and whatever. But I feel like there's somewhat of a disconnect. Like heroes are always at an arm's length. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what makes a hero heroic. Maybe we can
Absolutely,
start to
man.
drill down into that. So, yeah.
Well, because you have different categories of different type of heroes, you know. Um, but all of them, if you notice, I mean, the main theme of being a heroic is courageous, right? There's something to overcome that takes courage. That would I would say would be the main component of a hero. What would you? I mean, would you agree with that?
I think that's definitely an element, and courage doesn't always have to be you pick up a sword and do a thing, right?
Hmm.
You don't have to like it doesn't always mean these big huge acts of heroism. There's lots of different kinds of courage that show up, but I think that when we think of a classic hero, I think courage is one of those things. And what's interesting is courage is one of those it's one of those virtues. So virtues in the ancient world, there were four main virtues. Courage was one of those pinnacle ones, and it was definitely one that was tied to their heroes. Their heroes had to be heroic. That's it sounds like a no-brainer, but they had to be courageous. That was part of what they were. They exhibited courage,
Hmm.
I guess.
100%. I mean, especially if you go back to any of those old stories with like Achilles or Hercules and stuff, right? I mean, that's pretty much all of it. It always comes down to that.
And it's so important for us. I think so. We think about these stories, and I can't remember where it was being discussed, but our genres now are chopped up into stuff for kids, stuff for adults, and varying groups in between. And now you've got different genres and you've got different demographics and all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
I think a amazing story when you know you have a good story, an amazing story, an awesome story when it is, I was going to say demographic list, but that's not a word.
Hmm.
It spans all the different demographics: children, adults, old people.
Hmm.
Um, it resonates. And there are certain stories that do that where you can tell it to a child and they get it. Maybe they'll get more later, but they get it. And so I think sometimes when you go into the genre of things, we start to lose some of those elements because there's certain things to heroes that are they're universal. Everyone understands that in their struggle. Mike Porter coming in. Let me try to. There you go. Anti-hero is another big one, and we actually started talking about that. We're going to save
Mm-hmm.
anti-heroes for later on, but that is such a huge one too, especially now. And I think part of it is to try to breathe some life into the concept of heroes. And so what better way to do that than the hero that you weren't expecting because they're kind of not good.
Mm-hmm.
The reluctant hero is definitely another one. And just so everyone knows, Trinity is back, so we're
Oh,
okay there.
I was,
We're all right.
I was worried for a second. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
we're at night, right? Yeah. And another thing what's awesome with the hero stuff is you always see how people want to relate to whatever hero. I mean, that's kind of why like people really like the Spider-Man type of thing, right? Because he was just a normal guy, kind of kind of a geek nerd outcast, and then he gets bit by the spider, and then he becomes heroic. There's always that type of relating to the average person, especially as a child, because the child always wants to then in their imagination that's what they want to grow up to be. So it is that's another key aspect because no one really likes a superhero that is too perfect, right? I mean, people do some, but for the most part, they like to have a little chink in the armor. There's something like even Superman has kryptonite, makes him somewhat have a weakness.
right.
So,
But it's funny because some heroes, like you were saying, if they're too perfect, if they're too good, they're far away heroes. They're heroes
mhm,
that you stand down here and you look up and you see a hero. And when you start to see some of those faults within a hero, that is where it becomes relatable. And actually, um, the that idea I think of an anti-hero. Mike brought that up. An anti-hero is sort of like is relatable almost to a fault.
mhm,
Like now there's so much that you can relate to them there, and you see them actually exhibit things you don't like, and so then that relation there is different. And I wonder if sometimes there are those who maybe feel that way about themselves, not only that they're not heroic but that they're actually less than, which I wonder if there's some sort of connection there where you see someone else who is less than in a bunch of different categories that you relate to, and you almost root for them as well.
mhm,
And I think something else too, going back to that anti-hero thing, would be the concept of the that redemption arc
mhm,
where you have that as well, where um, I think one of the best examples of a redemption arc in the context of that hero sort of thing is actually Star Wars, and it's Darth Vader is one of the great redemption arcs because
good point.
you, you're not rooting for him at all. And what's interesting is in Star Wars, your protagonist, your hero, is the one rooting for this villain to turn, right? And
Mhm,
really only in the last what half of Return of the Jedi
mhm,
does it feel like that. But you get that sense, and it's not till you actually get to the end where you're like, oh, Luke was right.
mhm.
There is something there, and so I think that there's kind of a unique one. I think that's one of the more popular redemption arcs that kind of shows all those things. I honestly think that is the reason why nerdy things, nerddom is one of the best places to go and to find these things, because you have stories that do resonate. They resonate with kids, they resonate with adults, they resonate with old people. I think you actually do have pure some of these pure stories they're just good stories.
It makes sense. I mean, that's why the Bible's filled with stories, and that's how God operates. So it
Right.
works out perfectly. That I mean, it clearly how God created us that stories resonate. And obviously you see that in our culture and every culture, right? You always have different type of lores, every different type of epics, different type of myth,
Yeah.
wherever you want to go, different types of heroes and gods that they believed in and worship. It
Yeah.
always goes back to it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think going back to just that concept of the hero, going back to sort of those old ideas, when you're going back to the virtues, you
Hmm.
looked to the heroes to exhibit those things, right?
Hmm.
Um, Mike says here, a hero used to be virtuous and now has to be complex and complicated.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think, Mike, I think you nailed something that I think that sometimes we look at heroes. This happens a lot with like comic books or things. Is your heroes start to look childish, at least to some people. They look and say, that's so childish. No one's like that.
Hmm.
And so they want to find something that's more complex, more complicated, all those things. And yet, don't we all look back and want to have this more simplistic explanation for things. People say that, oh, there's so much gray in this world, but don't we kind of long for situations where there isn't gray? It is
Hmm.
black and white, where there is a hero and there is a villain and there's clarity there.
Hmm.
Are we looking for that? And doesn't that give us opportunities to look for those qualities of what it means to be heroic?
Now, would you? This is something that came to me right now with the idea that Adam was the first man, right? So, and how he failed, obviously, with like losing that he had an option to be heroic and fight evil. He could have, instead of being passive with Eve, he could have obviously stopped it right there. It's his responsibility and duty to protect the woman, to then guide it against Satan, the serpent. And he failed with that heroic opportunity. And then he falls, right? And now there's a redemption type of thing. They have Jesus being the perfect hero that redeems. So it's interesting how obviously we can all tell when someone fails, and we even feel it in ourselves when day-to-day lives, if something happens and you have an opportunity to quote unquote be heroic, and then if you don't do it or say something, then you have that guilt on you. So there's something
Yeah,
that resonates deeply into us in the psyche,
I think so. And you mentioned the Bible, and this is true for the Bible definitely, and others as well. But the Bible shows us where we have characters that we would say these are heroes, and what we see recorded very faithfully is a lot of their failures.
Hmm.
It happens quite a bit. Um, so I think there's that display there where you can still have someone who's regarded as someone who's great, someone who's faithful, someone who does the right thing, but you show those those failures where they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They weren't
Oh,
heroic.
that's the best way to learn. If you
Yeah,
you I mean, there's two different types of people in the world, right? Yeah, there's people that have to go through a situation and then fail to then learn, and then there's people that they can actually watch somebody else do something and learn from their mistakes. So ideally, you if hopefully you're one of the people that can learn from other people's mistakes, so you can
yeah,
take stories and take biblical references and how you see these characters that when they failed, then you don't allow those flaws to come in. I mean, David's a perfect example. Great guy, right? Great heroic archetype, and then he obviously falls with Bathsheba, and that is a good reference to us male leaders that, hey, follow the lead in this. Don't, follow his good attributes, and then you see where you fell. Don't follow down that road. You don't have to commit that same act that he fell into to then realize that it's going to cause pain and heartache for all sorts of different aspects. And yeah, I love how God works that way and how He uses the flaws of sinful, flawed men to then show us. I mean, that's the perfect example of Israel, right? And He chose Israel, but then Israel constantly stiff-necked people, never fully, going back to the bondage of false gods. But He gives us hope that clearly, because every day to day we know we're not perfect. You fall every day, so it's like it gives you encouragement to, like, I'm not the only one. Everyone falls. Look at all these great characters in the Bible, they fell. And that also to comic book heroes or whatever,
yeah,
because if you notice in every type of story or every movie or whatever, there's always a situation where, oh no, he's not going to get it, he's down, he's getting it's like the Rocky situation, right? And he's getting his
right.
butt kicked for 10 rounds, and then at the very end he wins. It's overcoming that really pushes that type of that
Yeah,
drive, yeah, drive that you just want to believe that you can also do that in your day-to-day life.
I think that's where it's important to have your hero be able to take the hits. And I think we see those heroes that do take hits and get hurt, who continue going and show this. Like I was saying, it's not always going up and doing a great act. Sometimes it's just enduring. It's you keep going, right? So I
Enduring.
think
Yep.
one,
Yep.
Rocky is a great example. Daredevil's another great example of that. Like he just keeps on going. He's got a lot of things against him, but he keeps going forward. Frodo, I think, is one of the great examples of that as well. It gets worse and worse and worse for him. He's more and more, feels more and more by himself, but he keeps going, he keeps enduring, he keeps taking one step after the other, for sure. And I think that's also why we have sports heroes. I really think that a lot of times it's those things. It's, yeah, we love to score, we love to see goals, we love to see all those different things, but it's the endurance. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that's missing. And actually, Trinity brought something up here. He said, work meetings, no one would ever say anything when the manager would ask if there was anything. I'd say some of the people started cheering just because they said something. And I think we key in on something there is that heroism, even small things,
Oh yeah,
are
dude.
so infrequent
It
that when
takes just
someone
one
does
guy.
anything,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah.
Takes that one person to speak up, and then everyone will champion behind that one person. It just takes that one person to say it is true. So that's something that if whoever's watching this, after the live stream, take that as encouragement to be that one person. You're not, because if you're thinking it, you're not the only one thinking it, but you may be the only one that acts on that thought. And then if you, it's like a tidal wave, or it's the
Yeah.
idea that you started. It's like a domino effect, and then people will get behind you. I mean, that's how kind of revolutions actually start, right? I mean, it takes someone to actually do something, then people that thought the same way start following.
Yeah.
You brought up Frodo and everything. Would that be a great transition into the mentor with a whole type of theme with heroes?
Yeah. I just want to catch up on a couple things here. Trinity, I'm assuming you mean in The Matrix, being a hero. She's a very interesting character. She actually plays into that mentor kind of role a little bit, at least initially. I think we always see Morpheus as that, but I think she plays into that a little bit initially.
Mm-hmm.
This one was fun. Stephen Curtis Chapman is a real life hero. Write a little more on that, Mike, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And yeah, going back, make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it sounds kind of silly. It sounds like Trinity's in a work meeting and just says something that maybe everybody else is thinking, right?
Yep.
But yeah, to make a difference, to actually actuate change. And the thing is that it's difficult for us to just drum that up in ourselves, and sometimes we don't even think we can do it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that leads us to mentors again. Like that concept of a mentor is so important for us to actually move from not being a hero or not doing the heroic thing to then transitioning to being a hero or someone who does heroic acts. And so I wanted to pull this up here real quick. This is the classic hero's journey, right? This is what everybody references. I think a lot of people have heard George Lucas talk about how the hero's journey helped him in developing characters in Star Wars. But this definitely is one of those. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, so we'll cut off some of the stuff, but just so we can see it a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
We're not really going to get much more than step 4 tonight. It sets up ordinary world, call of adventure, and then refusal of the call. And I'll speed over those just to get it to the point where you have someone who sees a call. There's a call there for them to be heroic or to do heroic act or to be a hero, and they refuse it. And it really takes someone else. In this here, it's the mentor, meeting the mentor, that becomes that thing that pushes them from refusal to then moving towards those acts.
Mm-hmm. And something that it's interesting too, that you think about it. The mentor is always like at least in practical use, I would say, the mentor is always a retired hero. Like that mentor has gone through being a hero, I would say, and now they have the skills and the knowledge and the wisdom to then pass it on to another hero. And that's something to use in application in our own lives, where if you are growing and you're maturing in the Lord and everything, and you've gone through the idea of the hero's journey in your life, whatever trial, tribulation, suffering that you have gone through, and then you've grown from it, you can now mentor other people. That's the idea of discipleship, right? So
Right.
I just love the idea that like the mentor is always like older person for the most part that has the wisdom to then pass on to a younger hero, because they were a hero in their younger time usually.
That triggered a thought, but I feel bad because I should have looked this up if I'm going to make this reference. But I think for many generations, the mentor was built in. It was whoever was the old guy
Yeah.
was the mentor, right?
Yep.
And
Karate
so
Kid.
you have
Yeah.
Karate Kid. It's like Mr. Miyagi.
Yep.
He's the old guy. He's
Yep.
the building manager or whatever. And very unassuming, right? And turned out that he really was someone who could train him up. But you have situations where, like in the past, they didn't have to look for a mentor. There was a mentor. There's a mentor right there. It's if you think of more of a family kind of structure or a tribal kind of structure, your old people were valued because they were everyday heroes as far as like, wow, how are we going to eat? Well, that old guy always used to go hunt, and now he's going to teach us how to hunt so we can eat. Like
Hmm.
that's a small little heroic thing. When you're starving, somebody with a sandwich is a hero, or
Hmm.
a dead animal, I guess. So you had that. There is a story. There's a book, and now this is what I was saying. I should have looked this up before, but this book talks about there was something happened. EMP. I don't know what it was, but there's basically no electricity anymore,
Hmm.
and almost knocked back to the Stone Age. And what ended up happening was they went to find the old people and ask them how to do things again. And it was kind of a beautiful thing because they went to like nursing homes or whatever and were like, how do you do this? And they're like, oh yeah, we used to do that all the time. And all of a sudden, the structure of that mentor kind of built-in structure came back to where people were like, how do I sew?
Yeah.
How do I do this? How do I preserve this meat? And it became like old people became valuable again. And it was
That
kind of sad at the same time because it's like we don't treat people like that right now.
and well, you know why? It's because YouTube has become our mentor. Like, you
That's
know what I
so
mean?
true.
We've kicked out all the old people. Like, well, we don't need you anymore. We got YouTube now. And just look that up. Now
Yeah, look it
that
up.
yeah, it's sad, but yeah, man.
You
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah.
YouTube is now replacing old people.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they want, man. That's
they want
exact yeah.
they want us
That's what
on
the
YouTube.
AI wants, man. That's exactly. So
Yeah, what are we doing here? We should find some other younger people than us to tell this to, not YouTube. We're just
yeah,
feeding it. We're feeding the machine.
yeah, no, they're going to destroy the algorithm. They're not going to let any. They don't want. Don't, don't want this to get out.
Think about let's think about some of these stories that we do have where you have a hero who just won't have any of it like that. So I took it away, but the call, right, the call and the refusal of the
Hmm.
call, these kind of things. Who are some of those heroes that are the most like, I don't want to do this, but then they end up being turned around by a mentor?
That is a good one. What ones do you have in mind right now? Because my favorite one's Frodo with Gandalf, but Frodo never really like fought too hard. I mean, he wasn't like super against it, right? I mean, he, he, he was kind
Yeah,
of he was kind of hesitant, but Gandalf was pretty convincing.
he was like Hobbit hesitant, wasn't he?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, that's not what we
I
do
don't want
here.
to leave, but I mean, can you blame him? I wouldn't want to leave the Shire either. That Shire's
Seriously,
paradise, man.
aren't we
Second
all just
Supper,
looking for the Shire?
yeah. Third Supper, man. Yeah, I would love to have that.
Second breakfast and third
Yeah,
supper. That's great.
yeah,
I think you have, in the Matrix. That's what Neo is. This
yeah,
very reluctant hero, right?
yeah.
And he has to jump into um, that role, or he's a bit pulled into that role, almost literally.
You know, it's a funny one is a Lion King with Simba coming back. He was kind of hesitant, in the
Yeah,
sense of the Return of the King. His mentor, who I mean, Timon and Pumbaa is his mentor. I don't know about
I
that
guess
one, but
so.
that's a good one. But no, because it's Nala
Did we
that
just
comes back.
break that story?
Pretty much. Well, yeah, well, Nala's the one that comes and convinces him to go back, right? Because the pride's all messed up. Yeah, I was just thinking about that being hesitant because he didn't want. He was
Yeah,
living a pretty good life, with Timon and Pumbaa. Yeah.
yeah, totally. And I think so. That actually brings up something else. Like sometimes maybe responsibility is that thing that really draws you in. Like I think that's what drove Frodo. He all of a sudden saw responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, that's a good
also,
point. Yeah.
actually, Simba's a good example. It was all of a sudden this connection. Like I think he was still dealing with stuff with his dad, and then
Mm-hmm.
that connection back. Like, oh, it's my time to step up and do the things my dad did. So it's almost like Mufasa was his mentor in
Yeah.
like the Lion
No, it's the
Kings.
monk. You have the what's his name?
Rafiki.
Yeah, there you go. There's the
They
old
didn't like
wise.
teach him anything, right?
No, but he's like he still has that archetype of the mentor in the sense of like because he's the one in this. He's
Yeah,
doing all the weird stuff. He
that's
leads Simba.
true.
Remember, he leads him away, and he has he
Yeah,
like takes him, and that's what convinces him to finally do it. You
he's got a
know
big stick. A
exactly.
lot of mentors have big sticks.
Oh, they always got a staff, man. You got to have a
Gandalf.
staff.
Yeah.
I know. I'm trying to side note. I'm trying to convince my dad to walk around with a staff and grow his beard out like old prophet. But
Oh, you should, man. Oh, awesome. That would
oh
be
yeah,
great. Well, Mike gave us a little bit more context for this. Stephen Curtis Chapman is the son of a modest local musician in Paducah. Sorry, anyone from Paducah who might watch this someday. Paducah, Kentucky. Grew up to be one of the greatest Christian music artists with awards in ministry.
Hmm.
One daughter tragically died, but used her death to minister
Hmm.
to others.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's beautiful. God will turn anything for good in the sense of furthering His kingdom. 100%.
absolutely. And he adds here, Sing Kurt Chastity, the only Christian music writer to win a BMI Icon Award. That's pretty awesome.
That is,
That's pretty great.
so,
And you
yeah.
know what? That is a great example of a hero, like someone who leads by example, because
Hmm.
that's a situation we hope to not be in, but we hope that if we're ever in that situation where we experience loss in that way, I think we hope that we will be one of those who handles it properly.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, that's the biggest thing with this whole topic, to be honest, because I love talking about like all of it. But the biggest takeaway is the application of we all, every individual, you can always put it on a micro level to day-to-day life in the different situations. And I mean, it's all going to be different, right? You're not going to have to go fight a super villain per se, or go box, Mr. T or something. But the idea that you have something that you have to overcome, you don't want to do it, yeah, but there's a responsibility that then pulls you. I mean, you may have a mentor, may have an older friend, you might have whoever, a pastor, a mom, a dad, older brother, older sister, whatever it may be. There's a mentor in your life that's experienced things to then help you along your journey. And that's something that we need to take all as fellow imagers of God, fellow humans, that yes, like movies are a grander scale of that little story type, archetype, but
yeah,
we have that. And then to take that call to push through those adversities and to get through that. Obviously, the only way you could fully do that is with the Holy Spirit guiding you and everything. But it is so critical to then understand the situations and to know that you have to go through these to then actually be a hero, right? Because these heroes, before it happens, they aren't a hero. They're just like you're the beginning of it, just an average dude, ordinary guy that then goes through this story to then come out the hero. So,
yeah. I think we like those stories where it's normal guy becomes a hero, because there's a bit of us who wants to believe that that's something that we could do too. And I think that's important. And we'll return to that in a second. But you know, humility is also something that a hero exhibits. So there you
I would
go.
say that's actually the greatest virtue. If follow Christ, the suffering servant by Isaiah 53. I mean, that is right there. Yeah, 100%.
A few minutes back. Oh, he's back. But all the stuff that he missed about his old job, being in that leadership role and helping mentor other associates, leading by example.
Oh,
And
that's needed. It's so critical. Right now, if you look at our culture, it is lacking that so greatly. You've emasculated men in general, and you've taken away masculinity for. I mean, that's what emasculate. But the
right,
idea that taking away leadership and taking away the virtues of a hero per se, because it's toxic. What the type of culture we're in, it's horrible in that sense. So it's awesome when you do have people going against that, and we need more of that. That's one thing I've actually been really trying to ingrain, and whoever will listen to me, is the idea that we need to bring healthy masculinity with strong leader. I mean, women are leaders too. Like you have strong leadership. So it's not just a man thing, but the idea is a man needs to then up that, because then a woman will follow that and then will continue. And it's so critical. That's every hero is a leader per se. They might not know it initially. They may not be like, "Hey, follow me," but them acting it out then makes other people look at that and want to follow.
yeah, and it's really important to do that. And Trinity brings something up here that I think is important. Failed in many arenas in front of pretty much everyone. Failure is important because failure allows you to exhibit these heroic qualities with that kind of adversity in a way that allows someone else to not only learn from that example, but to then be able to share their own failures. I mean, how many times are maybe you failed in a certain way and we're embarrassed to kind of talk about it. And
Hmm.
we then miss out on being able to mentor someone else because we're too worried about sharing how we failed.
100%.
right?
Yeah.
I think this goes to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Healthy masculinity is sharing failures to help other people learn to grow in their failures. And that's
Yep.
one of the big things that we've forgotten. And I think that is one of the things that defines a positive masculine figure with a negative one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're so embarrassed to share your failures because you think someone will think less of you, you miss out on being the mentor.
Well, it's
So I
like
think
the
that's super
idea,
important.
yeah, because it's the idea of the culture with masculinity, the one that's not a healthy way of like the idea of men not showing emotion. Like that's not healthy, obviously, because they have to bottle that up, then which then comes out in other areas. You want healthy emotions under control. Obviously, being a perfect example is Jesus weeping, the perfect man, the perfect. You want to talk about the perfect masculinity of having the perfection of humility, but then courage and just everything that you could think of as a perfect hero. He wept, and in the scriptures when it says wept, it's not just like a little tear; it is uncontrollable crying out. So that's like you're saying, the healthy masculinity is critical. It's critical.
Yeah, and I think so. I think it's so tough because I think the word toxic is well,
I
it's
know it's a trigger
toxic.
word. It's one of those trigger
It
words.
is,
Yeah.
and it's almost like toxic masculinity is now a thing that means something different than what it actually could have meant. It now carries so much baggage with it. It's difficult.
I agree.
Um,
Yep.
so you have, but to say, and so maybe we'll use positive and negative. So positive
Yep.
masculinity versus negative masculinity, as far
Mhm.
as how that looks, does have a component of owning your failure as a big component of those things for the purpose of being able to teach others. You'd
Mhm.
think that young people would learn from that, and we'd eventually get to the place where they don't make the same mistakes. We end up all still making the same mistakes.
Yep.
Maybe not all the same mistakes, but learning from someone else. I mean, this is a perfect way for you to kind of segue into that idea of what does it look for us to be a mentor, not just to be a hero, but to be a mentor and to help other people to show their own heroic nature. And
Mhm.
so there's a principle in this kind of thing with mentoring and teaching younger men, where you can either make, so if you are in a mentor role, you can either make mules or make stallions. And that's the two
Yep.
sides of it. Because if you just go, hey, you just gotta do these things. We just like, here, just do a thing. We just put them in a slot and just say, do what you're supposed to do. You end up with people, those men will never, they won't lead other men.
Mhm.
Your progeny ends with them.
Yep.
But if you instead look at someone to say, I'm going to share with you all these different things because you can be greater than I can.
You're a great example, like you brought up before we're on air about Elijah and Elijah and Now, here's my question to you: how do you pronounce? Because I know is it Elijah the
Oh,
second one?
Elijah and
Elijah.
Elisha. Yeah.
Elijah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I always like, I always hear people pronounce it differently. I'm like, what Elijah are they talking about? Like,
Before we move on, Provo Kid brings up a really great little quote you can put in your pocket. Failure is the first teacher. It's very
it's
true.
true. 100%. The school of hard knocks.
That's right. Yeah. In scripture, you have, I think, one of the great examples of a mentor and a mentee is Elijah and Elisha. And yeah, if people aren't familiar, you know what? Maybe we should do that on another stream. We'll do Elijah and Elisha as an example. But
That'd be a good one. There's
but
a whole, yeah, it's a whole discussion by itself. 100%.
and it's so funny because Elijah is called one of the greatest prophets, if
Hmm.
not the greatest prophet.
But
Right.
then Elijah gets set to a double blessing or double portion of what he had. Yeah.
So,
And
but
there's not as much written.
Elisha
Yeah.
does double what Elijah did.
Yep.
Does twice the miracles, has twice the length of ministry, all those sort of things. But it's Elijah that's highlighted as the greatest prophet. And I think part of that is because he was the mentor,
Hmm.
right? And
I
there's
agree.
other things too, but I think that's
Yeah. That's a good
part of
one.
that.
And then obviously, like you're talking about the idea of being a leader and passing it down to others for them to then pass it down even further. It goes to the idea of Paul and Timothy, where Paul tells Timothy, pretty much take what I'm doing, and then now you're going to then grow and then put that onto others. That is one thing that I've found so beautiful with the gospel and how Christ works with. He didn't come like because the Jews back then thought Jesus was going to come as a hero like a king of David and overthrow Rome and take the kingdom back, but he didn't do that. He came back to take the kingdom one by relationships and discipleships through his children that are following him, like from Paul to Timothy and then the Timothy to down to his people that he is pouring out onto. Again, back to the mentors. You have people just mentoring and mentoring, and it's like a chain, right? So you just have this chain going and growing, and it is a beautiful way to then build the kingdom. Um, just it's awesome how it works, and it's all about relationships, and that's one thing that's really sad about the culture we're in right now, with technology. Which technology is such a blessing in so many ways. Like obviously God will use it for good, but the way it
we're
takes
doing this now.
I know exactly this, but then some people then get so wrapped into it, then they don't know how to have personal interactions with people and have actual relationships one on one in person. Kind of just kind of dehumanizes. But yeah, it's all about. That's another thing about the mentor and mentee, or the person that's getting mentored relationship. It's always about that relationship. There's always a healthy respect for one another. There's a love there for one another. There's a bond between them. There's always some type of rift at some time, like the hero kind of is annoyed at the mentor or something, and there's a little conflict, but there's always resolution. Another good one is Doc and Marty with Back to the Future, right? Marty's like this hero, but Doc's like the wise guy trying to. There's so many different movies and stories to have that same structure.
What's cool about that though? The Back to the Future, like I rewatched it recently. I watched all three.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the third one because I'm not a chump, and people skip it, but you got
Mm-hmm.
to get to the end of it, right? But we never understand how Doc and Marty
are even
friends.
Yeah, I love that.
But it's never questioned, because every other character is just like, oh, Doc and Marty, it's never questioned. But we have no idea how that relationship started. Was he his teacher? Was it how? Yep. It's just nope. That's it.
Yeah, no one questions when he goes back to the future or back to the the past or whatever, that Doc is exactly the same age.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
No, I love it. He actually doesn't age. Like it even seems like he actually does a good job. Like he always looked old. Like he just always looked like that.
That's the joke when he goes to the future and he takes off his plastic. I said a word you weren't going to recognize me. He just looks exactly
I love it.
It's great.
I love it.
It's great.
That's what's so. And this is such a sidetrack. That's what's so sad with movies nowadays. The movies are terrible now. All the great movies are the old ones.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty much. Well, you could say the same thing about music too. I don't even know.
That's true. Yeah,
I don't even know any modern music anymore. Mike made a comment. This was when we were talking about Jesus. He wept, and he knew that he had the power of life and death. Never looked at the power of compassion. And that's such a great point, because what did he do right after he wept? Is he was weeping over the death of Lazarus, and he raised Lazarus from the dead. And he knew he was going to do it because he had talked about it before.
Yep.
But it is that compassion. And if you can have compassion for others in that way to where you actually are experiencing that, I think that is definitely a true mark of being that example to other people, to be so invested in people and care for people that you start to experience those things. And I think we have those kinds of relationships. Maybe only with one or two people. It'd be great if we really work to expand that. I mean, it's exhausting. It's exhausting, at least for me. It'd be exhausting to have that kind of relationship with so many different people, but it'd be very fulfilling at the same time.
100%. No, it is such a awesome way that God works with it. I mean, just trying to fathom existence and how all this is like. Why do heroes resonate to us? Why does any of this even make sense, right? But there's something to it that helps us learn and grow as a individual. And that's the whole point of, like, some people will say, like, well, if God's real, why is there suffering? Why is there evil? Why is there pain? Like, you need suffering and pain to get over that, because if you don't have certain types of evils and suffering, you don't have certain types of virtues. You can't overcome, you can't endure. Like we brought about being able to endure. that creates character within you, like the scriptures tell you, to then become a more mature imager of God. And that's what God's all about. Like, God's not trying to create brats, He's trying to grow mighty, mature human beings that are well rounded. Just like if you look at movies, the hero at the end is well rounded from his trial. He goes through the fire to then come out and become this refined hero. And that's us individually. We all are going through our lives to go through different types of situations. Some are worse, some are better. There's different types, but to then come out at the other end as a refined, ideally, child of God that then has this character that has been grown through us through that. Like, if you don't feel pain on your body, you can cut yourself. You don't realize you're gonna bleed out. You know, you don't like. Dude, I
Yeah.
smashed my finger today. It hurt like it hurt so bad, man. I'm gonna lose a nail. And the whole time I'm thinking like, well, this is beneficial because if I did that and I didn't feel it, I'm just walking around grabbing things, not realizing not to take it easy on that hand. It would make it worse.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. So it's very useful to have that type of understanding, because if you don't, and then suffering and pain comes your way, that's when then you start to curse God, or you start to have apathy, and you start to get negative and go through a depression, or you allow that darkness to then overcome you. That
Yeah.
is so critical to have that mindset to persevere and overcome, endure.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you would hope that you'd be able to learn some of these lessons to basically lessen the mistakes that we make, right? I use lesson in two different ways, right? Two different
Yeah,
words, but
yeah, yeah,
you learn the lessons so that you can decrease the amount of pain, suffering, mistakes, at least that you bring to
yeah.
yourself.
I know. Yeah,
You learn, you're
100%.
like, man, I'm not going to hold the hammer or hold the nail like that when I hammer a
Exactly.
nail in again,
Yeah.
something like that. But I think that's another reason why stories are so important for children. Um, I have a whole mess of kids,
You
and
got you got enough for almost our basketball team, bro.
yeah, pretty much. I almost do.
Yeah.
Um, the 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 thing that is so important for kids is for them to see these different things in the story. Like, think back when you're a kid, your experience level, your bubble of experience is actually pretty small,
Hmm.
right? The more that we can learn through stories, the more that will help us when we do encounter something that we haven't experienced before. We'll then see that challenge and maybe have learned something. And I think that's why you have the whole, like, the cautionary tale, the nursery rhymes, like, hey, I knew that if I was a kid walking around in the forest and I saw a house made out of candy, I'm not going to go over
Probably stay
there,
away. Yeah.
right? Because
You
of
know,
the
yeah,
witch.
yeah. You
But
know
then
what's
that can also translate to just a person trying to lure you just in general. That
mhm.
you now have a story that helps you because you haven't experienced that before, but that helps you navigate that situation, right?
It's exactly true. And this is again another topic altogether, another show. But how all those kid stories or lore, when you go to the origins, they're the idea that they were for kids. They are so dark and twisted and really creepy, right? Like when you get
Yeah,
into like any single one of those child preschool stories, it's like when you know the origins, like, oh wow, this. But at the same time, I was actually just having this conversation with my dad. Um, how we as like if you look at kids now, for the most part, it takes a lot longer for them to mature and grow up. But you look at like interviews of kids in like the 1930s and 40s, they spoke like little adults. The Seventh Day Adventist, I forgot her name, but she was like 8 years old or 9 years old when she was writing stuff about like their like theology and stuff. I don't know, she's having visions or whatever. But it's like she was
what?
9 years old. Yes, yes, yep.
Yeah,
It's like, what is going on? And then she then something hit her on the head, and then something. Well, again, totally different thing.
it's a whole
But I,
story. Yeah,
but kids had to grow up really quick, right?
yeah, it's true.
Especially when the lifespan was not the same, and kids just look differently, right? And that, if you think about it, that's also probably why. Because right now with our culture, it's really freaky and creepy that a 13 and 14-year-old girl can get pregnant and have, a period, in the sense of because they're children in our eyes. But back then, it's a totally different world. Like if you look to the scriptures, I mean, that's when they were getting married and they had they were on the farm, they had responsibilities. They were little adults. Like they were not these little kids walking around. Not no, they knew reality. They
So
were there, you
yeah,
know. It's a trip.
There's a whole other can of worms.
Whole other
The
worms.
concept of adolescence, the concept of a teenager. I mean, that only appeared in the 20th century.
Yeah, it's
And
true, huh?
then and you got like, so think about the movie Grease. If you've seen the movie Grease, everybody's played by a 30-year-old. I mean, that
Yep.
starts to skew your understanding of high school when
Yeah.
you look like and
Dude.
you're treating each other like you're 30 years old.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Very weird.
I don't like Grease.
Dude, that would be a great topic to go off of. That'd be great. I would love that one. Yeah.
Picking up with Mike's comment here, it said, "Look, today I got rammed in the back by a
man.
car. Hopefully, your car, like a car, rammed you. That because if you got hit, I'm Mike. I'm sorry." It said my credit union messed up my debit card, and I thought I activated the person earlier. Got to practice compassion. Yelling at people won't help.
100%.
None of those people were driving the car that hit you, Mike.
No.
You know, and even though you're having a horrible day, no reason to take it on others. It's such a good lesson.
Those are great great situations to keep your cool and have patience.
We enrich others in the world with our experiences. If you think one man can't make a difference, you're wrong.
100%.
That's wisdom right there.
Yep.
Write that down, Trinity. Make a T-shirt, or no, don't make it. Don't sully it by putting on a T-shirt. Let's just remember it. It's good. Oh my gosh, Pinocchio.
Yeah, I know. Going to that aisle, yeah, it is. Yeah,
did you see the new one?
I stayed away from it. I don't have to. Yeah, I've heard it's freaky though. But I mean, think about the ride too in Disneyland.
It's terrifying.
It's freaky, dude. It's real freaky. Or no,
nightmare fuel,
dude. Toad's Wild Ride is the most, and like your kids are going through hell. Like, what is going on in here?
We got amphibians driving stuff. We got horses that can talk. This thing, it's pretty freaky. The Pinocchio story, though. So think about just like two aspects. We'll go to two aspects. Two aspects of Pinocchio. When you lie, it's plain that you're lying, right? You can be caught with a lie, so you shouldn't lie. And the more you lie, the more people can see that you lied.
Yep.
And it's supposed to be scary. And so like he's got the nose, and in the book, in the original story, like birds come and like peck at it, and like that's where it goes. Is the birds come and destroy his nose? Like how horrifying is that to be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to lie.
Such a freaky, And then
him, the other is
him never being a real boy, him being a doll is.
I know
that's not weird enough right there.
You could throw anything at Pinocchio, and he's just made of wood, right?
Yep.
The other one is going to Pleasure Island, and the whole point of Pleasure Island is the more that these boys indulge in pleasure that they are not supposed to, the more they make a jackass out of themselves. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
How much better of a picture do you get? Like, hey, don't do those things. You'll turn into a jackass. And guess what? That's actually very real. You will turn into a jackass.
Yeah, 100%.
So
that's a great way. You can go through, there's millions, right? You can go through but that's the coolest part about bringing up the construct of it and the outline of how it works, that you have an idea of how the structure is, that you can find it in pretty much every single story. For the most part, little things will differ, little details, but the base is there. If you don't have that base, you don't have a good story, really.
Absolutely, and you know what? We can recognize immediately in a story when it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. We watch it once, we go like, "There's something wrong with that."
That's today's culture right now. Like with how they don't try to go in with the idea of making a good story. They come in with their own agenda first to then make a story around it, and you're not going to get a good story. And then that's what you see with the storytelling nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. And I really do think the mindless kind of things that's supposed to be kids' entertainment. Absolutely, Trinity. Our kids have been done a disservice. My kids watch old stuff. They don't hardly watch anything that's modern. It's all old things. They watch old TV, old movies, even old cartoons. They had to have a talk about what chewing tobacco is because they're watching Looney Tunes. But you know what? You got to roll with it, I guess. Yeah. And yes, Mike, you do need to go see a chiropractor. Mike does clarify because I won't be able to sleep if we don't. Remember this? It was in his car. He got hit pretty bad. It says, but my poor mom took responsibility because I was taking her to the doctor. Oh, your poor mom. My mom would do that too. She's like, if only you weren't taking me to the doctor, that wouldn't have happened to you. I can hear my mom saying that. Well, Mike, hopefully you can be her hero, help her out that way. And then, yeah, that's a different.
Oh yeah, you can go so many different topics. That right there alone, yeah,
that's a big one. Honestly, one of the biggest issues today. And you're right, the naivete of Pinocchio makes him the perfect victim. And that's true. And that's, I think, on purpose in that story is to show that because children are innocent, children are the perfect victim. And honestly, that does go back to this. They are the perfect victim. They trust, unless they are mentored, unless they learn how about dangers in the world and those sort of things, they are susceptible. And
that's what's so scary about,
need to be protected.
That's what's scary about false mentors, right? You want to talk about false, wolves in sheep clothing, false mentors that gain their trust and then have their own agenda to then corrupt their youth. And you see that a lot right now going on, besides just human trafficking, but just the idea of trying to push agendas and pushing ideologies on kids because they don't know better. And guess what? They have a mentor. It's just a bad mentor. Like, the mentor doesn't have to always be a good. There's bad mentors. Like, there's really bad.
The word that we would use for it, we can't say on YouTube or Twitter.
Yeah.
So I think you all know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But that truly is one of the large plights of our modern day. And it's sad that we can't look to see that. So a couple things to kind of wrap up, because we do have to wrap up. Schumann has to go to bed. So
I'm an old man, up at 4.
Up at 4. Couple things to that is that idea of a hero, what it means is that we have to take that time to not only hear stories, but be able to translate it to others. Towards the end of this conversation, we start talking about children.
Dude, that's the problem you're going to get when you have me on these shows. I just start going completely.
No, it's good. Because we went to the right place. Because think about it, like some people might say, like, oh, I don't know, like I'm whoever. There is always someone that you can be an example to. But the easiest way is your own children, or maybe nieces, nephews, neighbor kids, whatever. And you know what? What's sad? I was just thinking about this as I was saying that thing. Your neighbor kids, if you start to actually engage in conversation with them, most people will be suspect that you're a villain, even if you have good intentions. And I think that right there shows one of the major problems that we have in our world today is that concept and understanding of people being able to care for other people has now been so shattered that even someone who is acting honorably or with virtue will be held suspect because of how the rest of society has become. That's sad.
It's well, I would say that the enemy has had that perfect now. But that's a complete spiritual thing. I would say, because it's terrible, because it affects the next generation. It's affecting the youth because they're not getting proper mentors, because, like you said, there's a fear of being judged, and it's really sad. Unless you're a woman, you can do it if you're a woman. So there needs to be more woman mentors out there, I guess, talking to stray kids.
I guess, yeah.
You know what I mean? I can't go do it though. Like, what is this guy doing?
And I know that there are places, there are shelters where they have like families go, like where it feels like more structured. Like I know there are people who go and like just go read stories to kids or whatever in some of these places where they can. But I think for a lot of us, it's like there's that, but it's not just kids. It's other people. It's being an example, and it's as silly and as small as when you're walking into a bad situation, you go in with a good attitude and a smile, and sometimes that's enough. I had someone thank them for smiling at them, and I was like, "How horrible is your life that someone smiling and saying good morning to you is worth you stopping someone to say thank you?" It's sad.
It is. It is very sad, and that's one thing. If you want to be your hero, like you just bring it up, that's a great way to say it. If you want to be a hero, just smile at people. It will literally make them. It's like it's biologically known. It's like chemically known. Seeing someone smile makes you smile, makes you happy, gives you happy endorphins, and so that's the bare, like that. How easy is that? Like, how easy is something to do, and you can make somebody's day. It is. Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good thing to bring up.
We'll land this plane. One other thing which I need to say too is that we really do need Mike to go see a chiropractor, and just so encourage you to go and do that. And with that, Mr. Matt Schumann, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone else, thank you for the conversation. This was
Oh
great.
yeah, loved it.
Love chit chatting, and we're gonna get back on our Sunday routine. I think next week.
Yeah.
Be able to do that, and then maybe we'll do some of these evening chats sporadically. So we'll see.
May I actually no. Well, this Sunday I'll actually be in Texas, but maybe
Oh.
we do it next Tuesday again. I'll actually be.
Yeah, maybe I'll just hop on and I'll just read. I'll read a story.
That's not a bad idea.
Read a storybook or something.
Yeah.
Oh, probably copyright. Well, we'll figure it out. Mike says he's good. Okay. All right, Mike.
Good here. All right. All right.
All right. Have a good evening.
All right. God bless. Enjoy you guys' night.
And Pilgrim on, my friends. We'll see you out there.
Absolutely.
I have to push the button to end it. There you go.